This Will Smith interview, wow, he really opens up relationships, finding your purpose, making a difference. So much good stuff. Ready to dive in.
What gets me is how honest he is about his struggles. Childhood, dealing with fame, it makes him, like, instantly relatable.
Totally. You don't always hear a celebrity be so real about marriage, especially in Hollywood. And his search for, like, spiritual understanding, that's something a lot of us think about.
He even admits, right? Like, even with those blockbuster hits, he wasn't always happy. He was looking for something deeper, which led him to explore all these different faiths and stuff.
Oh, and he didn't shy away from the hard parts either. When he talked about thinking about suicide, that was heavy. It reminds you that even with fame and money, life can be tough. Finding that inner peace, that's so important.
It's that universal truth, real fulfillment, it comes from within. Aligning your actions with your values, trying to make a difference, something to think about.
Speaking of making a difference, that story about his grandmother washing homeless people in her bathtub, wow, that's real compassion, and you can tell it had a huge impact on him.
Leading by example, right? Something Will talked about a lot. Trying to live up to her example of love and service, even with all the craziness of his life.
And that brings us to this idea of the sacred clown, which is fascinating. It's like he's saying you can be funny and make people think at the same time, sneaking in wisdom with the laughs. What do you think about that?
He brings it back to being the genie in Aladdin. Think about it, you've got that classic Will Smith charm, but there's also this layer of, like, deeper meaning woven in.
Right. It's like these important life lessons kind of hidden in plain sight. Although he does mention feeling like he had to choose between, winning in Hollywood and being a good person. Like there was pressure to play the game, even if it meant compromising his values.
It's the pressure cooker of that world, right? That constant drive for success that can overshadow everything else. He's honest about falling into that trap, at least for a while, and how it affected him and his family.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even with tons of success, if you neglect your values and relationships, it can leave you feeling empty, which might be why he's so into exploring spirituality. Did you know he and Jada made it a tradition to study a new faith or practice every year?
It says a lot about their curiosity, that desire to dig deeper, to connect with something bigger than themselves. And they didn't hold back. The Bible, the Quran, Kabbalah, even Scientology.
Right. And it's important to remember we're not here to judge anyone's beliefs. We're trying to understand their choices and what we can learn.
Exactly. And to be fair, Will says even after studying all those traditions, they're not necessarily into organized religion. They were looking for those universal truths, the things that connect us all, which might be what drew him to the Bhagavad Gita, the story of Arjuna.
He seemed to connect with that idea of navigating life's, as he put it, perplexing situations. What did you make of that?
I think he was drawn to the idea of letting go of control, which is something his grandmother talked about a lot too. Remember her saying, let go and let God?
Yeah, it's like realizing you don't always control the outcome.
Right.
And it's not about being passive. It's about trusting that things will work out as they should.
Exactly. And that shift in thinking, it influenced how he approaches relationships too, especially with Jada. And speaking of relationships, he dropped some serious truth bombs in that department. That idea that most conflicts come from a lack of understanding. So true.
It's like we all have our own baggage, right? Experiences, biases. It's easy to forget that and just see things from our own point of view.
Like you said, our own poison.
Hmm.
And thinking the other person needs to change without looking at ourselves first. And that's not going to work.
And the advice he gave, so simple, but so good. Just repeat back what you hear before you answer. Do we actually listen to understand or just to reply?
It's our egos, always needing to be right. What if we actually listened with, like, curiosity, trying to really get where the other person's coming from?
Imagine how much better our relationships would be if we all did that. It reminds me of what he said about Nelson Mandela, being able to connect with anyone, no matter what.
Oh, man, when he talked about asking Mandela about that look on his face, that peace, and Mandela saying, come spend time with me, I'll teach you. Chills.
Can you imagine what he could have learned? It makes you realize those chances to connect, to learn from amazing people, you got to grab them.
Totally. Will sees it as a missed opportunity, for sure. But even without that time, Mandela had a big impact on him, especially that question, how can you smile in this world?
Finding that joy, even with everything going on, it's something that comes up a lot with Will.
It connects back to that sacred clown idea too, right? Using humor to, like, sneak in some wisdom.
It's not just entertainment for him, it's about making a difference.
Right.
And he's so good at it, making those complex ideas relatable. Remember when he said he wrote down Sacred Clown years ago? before he was even the genie.
He's always had that drive to do something more. He knows how powerful stories are, and he backs it up with action. Studying those spiritual books between takes.
Not your typical actor.
He lives it,
Yeah.
Which makes that story about the worst advice he ever got even funnier. Who knew Charlie Mack was such a bad influence, honestly?
Knock her out, she'll be yours.
Ugh.
Not exactly relationship goals.
Good thing Will realized that. But speaking of relationships, that broken calculator thing, that really got to me. Those patterns we get stuck in.
That image is perfect. The number 7, stuck. Doesn't matter what you do, wrong answer every time. Our past can do that in relationships, create those stuck buttons.
Makes you think, what stuck buttons do I have? It's like a wake-up call to figure those out, try to change them.
It's hard work, but so important. Recognizing those patterns, choosing to react differently, it's worth it. It's about growing, right? Healing. So you can have those real connections. Which reminds me of something else Will said about the difference between ignorance and evil. He called them twins.
He's right,
Yeah.
Ignorance, you can fix that. But evil? That's different. It makes you think.
It really does make you think. We're so quick to judge, right? Call someone bad without knowing what they've been through.
He's saying, try to come from a place of compassion. It doesn't excuse anything, but at least opens the door for change,
And that takes us back to Will's whole thing about being that sacred clown, right? Using humor to do some good in the world. I love that.
That's a cool goal. And you see it in his work, don't you think? Even from the early stuff to things like, was it emancipation? He's entertaining, but he's also saying something.
Always pushing the conversation forward. Like, hey, we can have fun and think about important stuff. And it's not just talk. Remember how he was so impressed with Julius Erving? That quiet confidence.
Yeah, that inner strength.
Yeah.
Like real strength, not just putting on a show.
And then there's Muhammad Ali. Totally different energy, but also such a powerful presence. I love that Will was so drawn to that, that fearlessness to be himself.
And even with that huge personality, there was also that humility, that desire to connect with people. True greatness.
It's such a good reminder. Real fulfillment, it's not about the awards or whatever. It's about how you treat people. And that seems to be what drives Will, using his platform to make a difference and doing it in a way that's both fun and meaningful.
You can tell his own journey, all that learning and growing. It's part of everything he does. Proof you can have success and stay true to yourself,
And that it's a process, right? Always learning, always trying to be better.
Exactly. It's about the journey, all the ups and downs, and choosing love, choosing compassion, even when it's tough. Will reminds us that we're all capable of that.
He really does. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this. Will talked about those broken calculators that can mess up our relationships. But what about in other parts of life? What stuck buttons might be holding you back from having deeper connections, finding more purpose, more joy? Something to think about as you go on your own journey.